listening to She Speaks Talk Radio, where women's words are changing the world.
Hello, this is Wendy Dixon from Intuitive Life with Wendy Dixon, and I'm pleased today to welcome Mala Brinsden onto our radio show. And Mala's business is No Regrets End of Life Planning. Mala's from Bristol, and she's agreed to come and chat to us today about her spiritual journey, about where she's been and what she does now. So Mala, thanks ever so much for joining us today. It's lovely to welcome you onto the show. So tell us a little bit about you.
Oh, thank you, Wendy. Well, where shall I start? Yeah, I'm Mala. End of life planning is my passion and my journey, I would say. I live in Bristol, and I usually travel quite a lot, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Travel for pleasure or for business?
Well, a bit of both. Well, it's kind of involved in the teaching I'm involved in, which is short moments. This is Chan teaching.
Yeah.
And so we have centres in Goa and also in Sweden.
Right.
So yes, I mean, when I go to Goa, I also combine it with a bit of beach time and hang out with friends. And,
how wonderful.
Yeah, really wonderful. And I've been very lucky the last 7-8 years. Well, before COVID, BC.
Yes, yeah.
So I used to go every year, kind of, January kind of to March time.
Yes.
And then Sweden in the summer. So yeah, very fortunate.
Yeah. So how did you end up doing this kind of work that you're doing now? What was your journey to that?
Great question, thank you. Well, I started the business really in 2019 before lockdown, but my aspiration really was after I supported a dear friend of mine who died in 2016, and there was just so much to it. I supported her through her diagnosis, and then she's 48, she got diagnosed with cancer, and she was going kind of down the path of kind of healing herself.
Yes.
And she's just so inspiring. And then it kind of got clear that the cancer wasn't going away. So I helped her kind of with support at home, getting things in place. Simple things like having food cooked and having the place cleaned and just being there for her on the end of the phone.
Yes.
Not being judgmental, just really being an opening kind of listening ear for her. And then she ended up going into hospital, and she died like 5 days later. So it was a bit of a shock. Well, it was a shock.
Yes.
And but I was also her named executor.
Right.
So that meant that this is the first time I'd ever had to do it. My parents died when I was in my 20s. So I feel like my journey with the whole death thing kind of started then, really. I feel like this has been leading to where I am today.
Yes. So, and that often happens, doesn't it?
Yes. So even though I didn't do any practical kind of arrangements when my parents died, because I had older siblings, when my friend died, I was responsible for, yeah, I was the executor of her will, you know, everything from like registering her death to arranging a funeral, which we ended up doing it ourselves. We didn't go for the funeral director in the end, because the one she wanted, they sold on to another business, so which is quite normal. And so it was like, right, well, let's do it ourselves. So it was really amazing, actually. We got friends that made her a coffin. Her sister and niece came over from Australia, and they decorated it. They just did a beautiful like mural on it. Mural, not mural.
But I bet Muriel would like it.
Mural on it. Yeah, so I learned so much. It was really kind of, and I was like, wow, I never knew this, you know. And it's like, how would you know?
Yeah, exactly. If you don't go through this experience of someone that you know or that you're close to passing away, you just kind of take for granted all the things that happen. You don't think about the fact that people might need support during that last period of their life when they're perhaps too weak to cook for themselves, but they still need to eat. They still need to have personal care, and they still need lots of other things as well, don't they? And I guess often, unless we're involved in that situation, we don't necessarily recognise it.
No. Yeah. And that's it, because it's so taboo. It's still such a taboo subject to talk about.
Yes.
People don't want to look at it and necessarily prepare for it. I mean, you've got the obvious things like, oh, people know they need a will or to arrange a funeral, but there's all the other bits in between.
Yes.
That preparation can just really support people and the grieving family immensely, you know. So so I was just like, oh, people need to know about this, you know. It's like it's an awful, you know, you are most vulnerable, we're emotionally vulnerable after, you know, when we're grieving.
Yes.
And then it's like having to do all the practicals as well as deal with the grief and make financial decisions.
Yes.
Arranging a funeral, and if we haven't talked to the person about what they wanted, you can end up spending thousands more than that person would have wished for, you know. It's really tough on the people left behind. So that was my kind of inspiration, really, to encourage people to get planned in advance, really.
So after your friend passed away, how did you then go about reaching out to other people? Did you go and do talks for people, or?
I didn't do it immediately, to be honest. But I've started running one-day end-of-life planning workshops in Bristol, and just kind of finding out more for myself, really, kind of doing all the trainings I could, studying, research, you know. I really just poured all my energies into that in the last since that time, really. So you know, mixed with my experience of like having been bereaved with both my parents, and I did a death doula study course, I guess that was during lockdown. So
tell me what a death doula is.
So a death doula basically means servant. It's a Greek word for servant. So a death doula is somebody that helps a person that's got a diagnosis, whatever stage of end of life they are. You kind of takes that journey with them. So it's not medical support, not medically trained. It's emotional, spiritual, whatever they need, basically. and it could be supporting the family. So it's really, I love the way it got described to me in my training, which was like the client is like the star of the show. It's their show.
Yeah.
And the doula is the stagehand.
Right. Okay.
So whatever's needed, that's what the doula will offer. It could be end of life planning support, you know, have a cup of tea, get the shopping, support the family so they can have a break. Yeah, like, you know, if they've got children, kind of, you know, just supporting the family, just supporting that. The whole. I suppose it's more holistic, isn't it? You're supporting the whole.
Yeah, sure.
So, yeah.
And I guess that when you talk about spiritual support comes in many different guises. And, you know, obviously we have religions and certain things that people believe in. But do you find that people change their minds about their beliefs at the end of their life, or that they become more focused on what their beliefs are?
I think mixed.
Yeah.
Mixed. I mean, because when you're faced with the end of life, it kind of puts everything in perspective, and you kind of ask, what's next?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've got a friend. Well, it was actually kind of. I've just spoken about confidentiality. So, it was a young man, and he's in his 50s, and he got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And right up until the day he died, he didn't want to talk about it. He didn't want to plan his funeral. He didn't.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and he didn't have a faith, and he didn't show an interest in that. So, but some people do. It really depends on the individual.
Yeah. So, and I guess for some people, it's kind of, they just don't want to know. You know, no. I guess some people think, well, I won't know anything about it afterwards anyway, so I don't care what happens. But unfortunately, that leaves it lots of difficulties for the people who are left to deal with the aftermath, if you like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Actually, one of my sisters said, she said, "Oh, just put me in a box and bury me." She said, "I won't be there." And I was like, "Yeah, but who are your landlords? Who are your friends? We've got very different lifestyles, and she lives in London, I'm in Bristol. It's like, yeah, who do we contact? Like, what, you know, who are your phone providers? Who's your electricity provider? You know, all these things, like, where's your paperwork, so that we, you know, you have to register a death, and it's like, people don't realize that. Yeah. So, but and
as you say, when people are in that state of grief, it's often difficult to even physically even start thinking about all the planning that is involved. And I remember when my father passed away, and it was very sudden. We didn't know anything about it, and we hadn't got a clue where to start. And nobody tells you. You know, I went a week prior to my father passing, I went to an uncle's funeral, and I can remember standing there thinking, if anything happened to my family, I wouldn't have a clue what to do. And then a week later, I'm faced with it myself. And it's kind of, you've got to fumble your way through it, haven't you? We didn't know what my dad's wishes were. We didn't know whether he wanted a cremation or a burial. And it was difficult to make those decisions, because you don't know if you're doing right for what they really would have wanted. As a spiritualist, I believe that, you know, his soul has left his body anyway, and it's only a physical shell that is left. But that is my belief. It's not everybody's belief, is it?
Yeah.
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 And as you say, it's like with your sister, who are her friends? Who would you contact to let them know that she's passed away? Who would you contact in her workplace if she still works? In all her providers, etc. How would you know what? Okay, she said put me in a box, but it's not quite as simple as that legally, is it? Just to put somebody in a box. So there's kind of quite a lot more to it than we initially think about, and as you also say, people often don't want to think about it.
No.
Mm.
No, and that's understandable. You know, I remember after my mum died, my dad wanted to talk to me about putting some money in an account, because you've got like you know, you can gift money.
Yes.
You've got to do it within that 7-year period, otherwise then they have to pay inheritance tax on it, which is what happened to us, unfortunately. But I just didn't want to talk about it. I think I was about 24 at the time when he wanted to talk about it, and I was like no.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, don't be morbid, Dad, you know. I was just, yeah, you'll live forever, you know. It's kind of like I was still, you know, grieving for my mum, and just the thought of losing my dad as well was just like, I just could not go there.
No, exactly.
So,
exactly. And do you also work with people from a grief perspective afterwards? So do you do any kind of counselling or anything like that?
No, I haven't done so far. But I've got, you know, like all the contacts. Got all the contacts for people.
Yes.
And refer on. So yeah, I like networking and stuff. So yeah, and I'm actually in the process of applying to be a funeral arranger.
Right.
So and I know, they do all the training there for that, like bereavement counselling, and so I think I did actually get the opportunity to be a coordinator for a community bereavement group last year, but I just thought I would rather concentrate on the preparations.
Yes.
So it's, I think I like to focus rather than spread myself kind of too thin. Like,
yes. Yeah.
So that's, I turned that down actually, but and sometimes I run like death cafes, and you get people obviously coming on, and it seems like everybody's known someone that's died, so people want to talk usually. So
yeah. And when we talk about that grief process, it's not just cut and dried. Somebody passes away or dies, or however you want to describe it, and the rest of the people are left dealing with the aftermath of that, as I said earlier. But also, often we don't expect the grief that accompanies the passing of somebody, and it's difficult to deal with, because I guess we expect some emotion. We don't necessarily expect the length of time that often it happens over, because it doesn't just go away overnight, does it?
No, and there's no set formula.
No.
There's no set pattern you can follow. And like a couple of weeks ago, I was somewhere, and I walked into this office, and I saw this man sitting behind a desk, and he looked exactly like my friend. I've just supported another friend who's died earlier last year, and it just looked like him. Long hair, ponytail, sitting on his laptop, and you just have to double take. And I just stared at him, and it was like, oh, it just hit me. This wave of grief just hit me, and I'm not one to hold it in, so I was just sitting there quietly sobbing, and then waiting for my appointment. But you just don't know when it's gonna come. And I think years ago people used to wear armbands, didn't they? Like
they did. Yeah. Or they would have a period of grieving where they'd wear all black, for example. But that doesn't happen now, so you don't know, do you? And often people will say, "Oh, get over it. It's happened. You need to move on." And it's not that easy, is it? It's not that easy. Yeah.
And people don't really know what to say afterwards. I think people find it awkward. It's like, if I feel comfortable with something, then I feel comfortable with somebody else having those being in that state. But I know, like, after my mum died, it's like people just didn't know what to say. Like,
Yes.
my friends would like come out with some really insensitive things, and I know they didn't mean it, but it was just like, and I felt uncomfortable because I didn't know how I was supposed to be feeling.
Yeah.
We never spoke about it as a family back then, so it was just such an isolating time.
Yeah.
You know, it was before the internet and mobiles, and so it just felt very isolated.
Yeah.
And
I've seen that often people will say something initially, you know, sorry for your loss or whatever, and then you know, weeks and weeks later you'll cross over the road to avoid speaking to that person, and it's often the latter part, you know, the later stages after the death, that people will start to, reality kicks in, the reality of not having that person in their life anymore. And it's at that time that often they need to start talking about things and, you know, discussing their partner or their friend or their loved one generally. And people kind of often will shy away because they're frightened of putting the foot in it, or saying something insensitive, or simply don't know what to say, as you say, Mala.
Exactly.
So I think we all need to perhaps try and be a little bit more aware and a little bit more supportive to people, and recognize that it is a journey that people go through. It just doesn't change overnight.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Are there any kind of books or anything that you could recommend for our listeners to help them?
Do you mean so I'm looking at my bookshelf. Do you mean after the do you mean at any stage?
At any stage. It could be, you know, is there anything that's out there to support people who know that they've got somebody who's terminal, that will help them to get the head around that?
Goodness.
Or any groups even?
Well, I think the Marie Curie is amazing.
Yes.
Marie Curie and the Macmillan. Like, when I was supporting my friend last year who was still at home, we had quite a journey with that, and I got their phone line, which was lovely, and I could ring up and just talk about the stuff that I couldn't talk to about my friend. You know, I would need to support him, not to put my, you know, my stuff onto him. So that was great. And they were just so lovely, you know, and it's free. It's a free confidential helpline. So,
and that's Marie Curie and Macmillan.
And Macmillan, they're so good. They're so good. You know, and if people have got a local hospice as well.
Yes.
So we had support from the hospice for like, but that was more like the medical side of things.
Yes.
But they were helping with the pain management and the medicine. And hospices are amazing because they do so much more. People think, you know, people kind of just go there to die, but they offer so much more than that. It's quite incredible what a hospice provides, the support for the families and the people that are going through the illness with their journey. So Catherine Mannix is one of my favorite people, authors. She's great. I haven't got the right books here. That's so funny.
That's okay. I think that it just gives people somewhere to think about, that, you know, I know I could go there for help, or you know, obviously they can link up with you as well on Facebook and at your website. And
absolutely. Yeah.
Would you like to tell us your web address and Facebook page?
Okay. So my website is www.no-regrets.co.uk, and you can find me on Facebook. I think it's Mala Brinsden, and I've also got a private group called No Regrets, and yeah, it's a lovely group, worldwide community where I share about all different aspects of end of life planning, top tips, and yeah, you've just got the support of a whole worldwide community. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, fabulous. Well, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us today, Marla. It's been a really interesting talk because often, as you say, we don't think about end of life because we're too busy living the life that we're in. But it is something that I think is really important that we have more of awareness of, not only for ourselves as individuals, but also to support others. So thank you again for your time today. And I'd like to say thank you to our listeners for listening to us. This is Wendy Dixon at Intuitive Life, and look forward to linking in with you soon. Lots of love.